The planet of Zynth was a world covered in black stone and burning skies. Its people lived in fear every single day. They did not smile, they did not speak freely, because above them all ruled one being, the alien queen. Her name was whispered in terror, never spoken loudly. She was tall, her skin dark as night, her eyes glowing red. Her voice was sharp like broken glass. But the most frightening part of her was her long, scaled tail. It was not just a part of her body. It was her weapon, her symbol of power. The people said, no blade can cut the queen's tail, no fire can burn it, no enemy can survive it. Every time she walked through the streets, her people bowed low. If anyone dared to lift their eyes, the tail would strike. One hit was enough to break bones, another to end a life. So they kept their heads down, whispering prayers to survive the day. She enjoyed this fear. It was the fuel that made her stronger. In her palace made of iron towers, she sat on a throne of bones. Each skull on that throne was a reminder of those who defied her. She looked at her subjects like they were insects. She believed fear was the only law. Fear me, and you live, she said. Defy me, and you die. But deep in their hearts, the people hated her. Mothers cried for their children taken for battle. Fathers cursed her in silence. Yet no one spoke against her, because her tail was faster than their hope. The queen's army spread across the stars, conquering smaller worlds, enslaving new species. Wherever she went, her name carried darkness. Whole planets surrendered without a fight, all because they knew of the tail that no weapon could touch. Still, there were whispers of change, stories of strange beings from faraway systems, stories of humans, creatures who lived on a blue planet. The queen laughed at such tales. To me, they are nothing, she declared. No human could ever stand against me. One night, as firestorms raged outside her palace, she called her generals and demanded new slaves. She wanted more blood for her arenas, more fear for her throne. The generals bowed, trembling before her red eyes. But then, a messenger entered with shocking news. A human has arrived, my queen, he said with shaking voice. The hall went silent. The generals looked at each other, confused. The queen narrowed her eyes. A human? Here? On my world, she hissed. Her tail slammed against the floor, cracking the stone. Yes, my queen, the messenger whispered. He walks among the people, but he does not kneel. The queen froze for a moment, then burst into laughter. Her laugh was cruel, echoing through the hall. No one refuses to kneel before me, she said. Bring him to me alive. I want to see this insect myself. The order was clear. Her soldiers marched into the city. The people of Zynth hid in fear, but their hearts burned with a secret hope. Someone had come, someone different, someone who did not kneel. The queen prepared for his arrival. She stood tall in her throne room. The great fire pits burned around her, shadows dancing on the walls. Her tail moved like a living serpent behind her. She smiled a cruel smile, waiting. Let him come, she whispered. Let him learn fear. The doors opened. The sound of heavy steps echoed across the hall. The soldiers dragged the stranger forward. But he was not broken. His head was high, his eyes calm. He looked at the queen, not with fear, but with defiance. The queen stared at him with curiosity. This human was different. His clothes were simple, his weapon only a sword, yet his presence was strong. She could feel it, a strange energy she did not understand. The hall grew tense, the people holding their breath. The queen leaned forward on her throne. Her tail curled like a predator ready to strike. Human, she said, her voice cold. You stand before the ruler of Zynth. No one resists me, no one refuses me. Now kneel, or die. The hall waited in silence, the air thick with fear. But the human did not bow. He did not tremble. He looked straight into her glowing eyes and spoke with steady voice. I kneel to no tyrant. The words cut deeper than any blade. The generals gasped, the guards froze. Never in all of history had someone dared to say such a thing. The queen's smile vanished, her eyes burned with rage. Her tail slammed against the ground like thunder. For the first time in years, she felt challenged. And in that moment, the story of fear began to change. Because one human had spoken the impossible, and the queen knew this was only the beginning. The throne room of the queen was silent. The flames of the fire pits flickered, painting the stone walls in red light. Every alien in the hall held their breath. The human had spoken the unthinkable. "I kneel to no tyrant." The queen's eyes narrowed, glowing like molten fire. Her tail moved behind her like a striking serpent. For years, she had crushed every voice, every act of defiance. But this one human stood tall before her, unshaken. His words echoed across the chamber, louder than the queen's rage. Her general stepped forward, hissing. "My queen, allow us to kill this insect now," one growled. But the queen raised her clawed hand, stopping them. "No," she said, her voice sharp and cold. "This one belongs to me." The human did not move. He stood in the middle of the hall with calm eyes. He had only a sword strapped to his back. Against her monstrous strength and her unstoppable tail, it looked pathetic. Yet there was something in his gaze that unsettled even the bravest of her guards. "Do you not know who I am?" the queen asked. Her voice cut through the silence like a blade. "I am the terror of 10 worlds. I am the flame that consumes armies. I am the queen of Zynth, and all who see me bow. You are nothing, a fragile creature of flesh and bone. Your kind should tremble in my presence." The human tilted his head slightly. His expression remained calm, even amused. "You rule through fear," he said. "You break the weak and silence the brave. But fear is not power. Fear ends the moment someone decides not to kneel." A murmur rippled through the hall. The slaves and servants hidden in the shadows looked at each other in disbelief. Hope stirred faintly in their hearts. The queen heard it, and her rage grew stronger. Her tail lashed the floor, sending cracks across the stone. The sound made the walls shake. "Enough!" she roared. Her voice thundered like a storm. "You will die in my arena. I will crush you before my people. Your blood will teach them what happens when defiance rises." The guards seized the human by his arms, but still he did not struggle. He allowed them to drag him toward the great gates of the arena. The queen followed, her steps echoing with fury. The crowd outside already gathering, chanting her name in fear. The arena was a pit of fire and steel, its walls high, filled with spikes and chains. Thousands of eyes watched from above. Creatures from across her empire were present. Slaves, soldiers, and nobles, all eager to witness another victim fall. The queen stepped into the arena first. Her presence alone made the crowd kneel. Her tail whipped behind her, leaving trails of sparks. She raised her hands, and the silence turned to cheers. "Today you will see the fate of a fool," she declared. "No one refuses me. No one escapes my wrath. Watch as this human is broken." The gates opened, and the human walked forward. He was unchained now, his sword in his hand. His eyes scanned the arena calmly. The alien crowd expected him to tremble, to collapse in fear. But instead, he tightened his grip on the sword and stood tall. The queen circled him slowly, her eyes burning. Her tail dragged across the ground, leaving scars in the stone. She wanted him to bow, to beg, but he only watched her with steady focus, as if studying her movements, as if he was waiting for the perfect moment. "Do you still refuse?" she hissed. "You face me in my own arena, before my own people. One strike of my tail, and you will die screaming." The human gave a faint smile. "If your tail is your power, then it will miss me again and again. And when it does, you will know fear." The queen froze, stunned by his boldness. The crowd gasped in shock. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. She laughed suddenly, a cruel and thunderous laugh. "Then let us begin," she said. Her tail rose high like a spear of living iron. The duel had started. The first strike came like lightning. The tail cut through the air with deadly speed. But the human moved, stepping aside, the strike missing by inches. The stone floor cracked where he once stood. The crowd shouted in disbelief. Again the queen struck, faster this time. But again, the human dodged, rolling across the ground and rising with his sword ready. His eyes never left her tail. Every move he made was calm, calculated. The queen's smile faded as frustration built within her. "You cannot run forever," she snarled. But the human spoke firmly. "I don't need to run forever. I need only one moment, and that moment will come." The crowd leaned forward in awe. Whispers spread among them, whispers of hope. For the first time, they saw someone who did not bow, someone who faced the queen without fear. The queen roared, her fury shaking the arena. Her tail struck again and again, each blow stronger than the last. But the human moved like water, flowing around her attacks. The clash of strength and defiance filled the air. The people could feel it. Something was changing. The duel was not over, but already the queen knew this human was not like the others. He was more than flesh and bone. He was defiance itself. And in that defiance, her reign of fear began to tremble. The arena of Zynth was a monster in itself. Its walls were high and black, carved from volcanic stone. The ground was cracked and uneven, littered with old bones. Torches burned with green fire, casting long shadows. And the smell of blood was heavy in the air. For years, countless victims had died here. Slaves, rebels, even beasts from faraway planets. All crushed beneath the queen's unstoppable tail. The people had watched in silence, forced to cheer as their queen destroyed every challenger. But today was different. Today, a human stood in the center, unbroken. The crowd filled every seat, thousands upon thousands. Nobles in shining armor, soldiers with banners. Slaves pressed close to the walls, trembling but secretly hopeful. The queen entered first, tall and terrifying. Her presence made the crowd fall silent. Her tail moved like a living weapon behind her. It was said to be sharper than any blade, stronger than any steel. Her throne was built on fear, and the tail was its foundation. Across from her, the human stepped into the arena. His boots crunched against broken stone. He carried only his sword. No shield, no armor, nothing but determination. The crowd expected him to shake with fear, but his steps were steady, his eyes calm. He looked at the queen, not as a slave looks at a master, but as an equal facing another warrior. The announcer shouted, "The queen of Zynth faces the defiant human. The fight ends with his death or her command." The words echoed, and the drums of war began to thunder. The queen's voice carried across the arena. "Human, you will be my lesson to all. Your blood will water the stones, and your broken body will show my power is eternal." The human did not answer. He only drew his sword, the blade shining faintly in the green fire. His silence was louder than her threats. The crowd leaned forward, waiting. The air was so heavy with tension it felt like the whole arena might break. Then the queen struck. Her tail lashed forward with a speed no eye could follow. The air cracked as it cut through space. But the human moved, twisting aside at the last second. The ground where he stood exploded into dust and shattered stone. The crowd roared in shock. Again, her tail whipped forward, this time from above, aiming to crush him flat. But he rolled, sparks flying as the tip of her tail scraped the stone beside him. He rose, sword in hand, eyes locked on her every move. The queen snarled in frustration. For the first time, someone was surviving her strikes. The audience was confused, whispering to one another, "This cannot be." A noble muttered, "No one escapes her tail." Another gasped. But the slaves in the shadows dared to hope. Their eyes widened, hearts racing. Could this human truly stand against her? The queen's fury grew. Her tail lashed in a blur of motion, strike after strike. She attacked from the left, from the right, from above. Each blow strong enough to kill a beast twice the human size. But he moved with strange precision, not wasting energy, not panicking. Every step was calculated, every dodge exact. It was as though he had studied her, as though he already knew where her tail would strike. The queen hissed, her voice sharp with rage. "You dare mock me with your tricks? You are nothing but prey. The human spoke for the first time since the fight began. His voice steady, carrying across the arena. If I am prey, then why does the predator keep missing? The crowd gasped. The slaves smiled in secret. The generals gritted their teeth. And the queen's anger burned hotter than ever. She launched herself forward, claws reaching, her tail spinning like a whip of steel. The human parried with his sword, sparks flying as steel met scale. The impact shook his arm, but he did not fall. He stepped back, breathing hard but steady. The queen realized something strange. His sword had not broken, not even scratched. It was no ordinary blade. The human adjusted his grip. He was waiting for the one mistake she would make. Every fighter, no matter how strong, made one mistake. And when she did, he would strike. The crowd felt it. The tension, the danger, the balance shifting. For the first time, the queen's victory was not certain. Her power was not absolute. The arena that had always been her throne now felt like a cage. The queen roared, "You will not survive the next strike, human." Her tail rose high, glowing in the firelight. It came down with all the force of her fury. But as it struck, the human moved again. This time not just dodging, this time countering. His sword flashed like lightning. The sound of steel cutting through scale filled the arena. The crowd fell silent. The queen froze, eyes wide. Her tail had not yet been severed, but blood dripped where the blade had bitten deep. For the first time in her reign, her tail had been wounded. The slaves gasped with joy. The nobles whispered in fear. The queen's fury was endless. Her eyes locked on the human with hatred so strong it shook the ground. But beneath that hatred was something new, something she had never felt before. A flicker of fear. The duel was far from over, but the people knew one truth. The Queen of Fear had finally found her match. The arena shook with the queen's roar. Her wounded tail dripped dark blood on the stone floor. For the first time in her reign, her weapon had been touched. Her pride had been cut, her legend stained. The crowd was stunned, frozen in disbelief. No one had ever done this. No one had ever made the queen bleed. Whispers spread quickly among the people. "Did you see it?" a slave muttered. "He cut her tail. He actually cut it." The nobles hissed in anger, refusing to believe. But deep inside, even they felt unease. The queen's glowing eyes locked onto the human. Her fury was so great the flames and the torches trembled. Her claws scraped the ground. Her chest heaved with rage. "You dare," she thundered. "You dare wound me in my own arena, before my own people?" The human said nothing. He stood with his sword lowered slightly, his chest rising and falling with controlled breath. He did not look afraid. He did not look proud. He only looked focused, every muscle ready, every step measured, as though he had trained his entire life for this one fight. The queen's tail whipped behind her. The wound burned, but it was not enough to stop her. She raised it high, every scale glowing with fury. "This will end now," she roared. The tail came crashing down, faster than before. The human sidestepped, the ground shattering beneath the strike. Dust rose, covering the air. The queen struck again and again, each blow stronger, each roar louder. The arena walls shook, chains rattled, torches fell. The human moved through the storm like water. Every dodge timed, every step light. His sword flashed only when needed, deflecting death itself. The crowd leaned forward, caught in the rhythm. It was no longer just a fight of strength. It was a battle of patience, of will. The queen poured her rage into raw power. The human answered with calm precision. Strike and dodge, roar and silence. The arena became a dance of destruction and defiance. The queen's generals shouted from the stands, "Crush him, my queen. Tear him apart." But the more she attacked, the more she missed. Her fury blinded her, and the human saw it. Every mistake, every overreach. Every second her tail grew slower, heavier. She was strong, but strength without control was weakness. The human whispered under his breath, "Anger makes you sloppy." Then aloud, he shouted so the arena could hear, "You rule through fear. but fear has ruled you. You are a prisoner of your own power." The crowd gasped. Slaves covered their mouths in shock. Nobles hissed in fury, but the words cut deep. Even the queen felt the truth in them. Her eyes widened, then narrowed in rage. "I will silence you forever," she shrieked. Her tail swept across the ground like a giant blade. The human leapt high, landing lightly on broken stone. His sword spun in his hand. The crowd saw it clearly now. He was not just fighting for survival. He was waiting for the one perfect chance. The queen lunged forward with all her might. Her tail slammed down. The human raised his sword, steel meeting scale. The sound was like thunder. The blade slid deep into her tail again. The queen screamed, the ground shaking beneath her fury. The arena exploded with noise. Slaves cheering, nobles shouting, soldiers trembling. The people had never seen such defiance. They had never dared to hope. But this human gave them something they had forgotten, the vision of freedom. The queen staggered back, blood dripping from her tail, her breath heavy, her chest rising and falling with rage. But her pride forced her forward. She refused to believe she could be beaten. "I am the queen of Zynth," she roared. "I cannot kneel." The human stepped forward, sword raised. His voice carried calm power. "Then you will fall." The two stood in the center of the arena, the queen with her fury, the human with his will. The clash was not just of strength and speed. It was the clash of fear and courage, of a tyrant's rule and a defiant heart. The crowd could feel it. The end was coming. The next strikes would decide not only the duel, but the fate of a world. The arena was trembling as though the stones themselves felt the weight of the battle. The queen stood tall, her tail bleeding but still deadly. The human stood opposite her, his sword raised, his breath steady. The crowd had never seen such a sight. They had only known two outcomes before: challenger kneels or challenger dies. But this human had already changed the story. The queen's eyes burned with fury. Her pride was shattered by every drop of blood falling from her tail. No wound had ever touched it before. No weapon had ever pierced the scales. Yet the human's blade had left its mark twice. It was more than injury. It was humiliation. "You will not leave this arena alive," she roared. Her voice thundered through the stands, shaking the hearts of her people. Her tail whipped behind her with renewed rage. Though weakened, it still moved with terrifying force. She launched herself forward, claws outstretched. The human met her advance with calm focus. The ground cracked as her tail slammed down. The human rolled aside, dust exploding around him. He leapt to his feet, swinging his sword at her tail once more. Sparks flew as steel clashed against scale. The queen hissed, pain ripping through her body. She struck again, a furious storm of blows. The crowd shouted wildly. Some screamed for the queen to destroy him. Others whispered prayers for the human to survive. The slaves in the shadows clenched their fists. They had never dared hope before. But now, they believed change might come. The queen's tail struck from the left. The human dodged, blade cutting the air. The tail struck from the right. He ducked low, sliding across the broken stone. Every strike grew slower, every lash heavier. The queen was bleeding more and more. Her strength was still great, but her control was slipping. The human watched carefully. He was patient, his eyes sharp. Every fighter made a mistake, and he was waiting for hers. His breath was steady, his movements precise. He knew the next moment could decide everything. The queen roared, lifting her tail high into the air. The shadow of it fell across the arena floor. It gleamed in the firelight, still terrifying despite the wounds. The crowd fell silent, knowing this strike would be the deadliest of all. The queen poured all her fury, all her pride, all her power into the blow. "You will break," she screamed. Her tail came down like a mountain falling. The arena shook, the fire pits flickered. But in that instant, the human moved, not away, not aside, forward. His blade rose, his eyes locked on the target. He timed it perfectly. The impossible moment arrived. Steel met scale with a scream of metal and flesh. The human sword cut through, clean and final. The queen's tail split apart, severed from her body. Blood sprayed across the arena floor. The sound of the strike echoed like thunder. The impossible had been done. The queen collapsed to her knees, a scream tearing from her throat. The crowd gasped, their voices stolen by shock. For centuries, the tail had been her power, her legend, and now it lay broken on the stones beside her. The symbol of her fear was gone. The nobles looked at one another in disbelief. The generals froze, unable to act. The slaves cried out, tears in their eyes. For the first time in their lives, they saw their tyrant fall. The queen trembled, clutching the ground, her eyes wide with pain and rage. She could not accept it. She could not believe a human, a fragile creature of flesh and bone, had taken away what no army ever could. The human stood tall, his sword still glowing faintly with her blood. He looked down at her, his face calm. There was no pride in his eyes, only certainty, the certainty that fear had finally been broken. The silence of the arena was broken by a single whisper. She is not invincible, someone breathed. Then another voice shouted, she bleeds. And then the sound spread like fire. She bleeds. She bleeds. The queen raised her head, her face twisted in rage. But beneath the fury, for the first time, there was something her people had never seen in her eyes before. Fear. The human pointed his sword at her throat. His voice calm, steady, powerful. Your reign is over. Kneel. The arena held its breath. The queen shook with fury and humiliation. Her pride told her to rise. Her power told her to strike again. But her body was broken, her weapon gone, and her people no longer saw her as untouchable. The human's words echoed across the world. Fear ends when courage stands. And in that moment, the queen knew she had lost. Her tail was gone, her legend destroyed. The age of her terror was crumbling before her eyes. The arena was silent. The queen's severed tail lay across the stones, bleeding and twitching. The fire pits flickered weakly, as if even the flames feared what they had just witnessed. The people of Zynth stared in disbelief. Their tyrant, their monster, their living nightmare was on her knees. The queen clutched the ground with trembling claws. Her breathing was ragged, her body shaking from pain and rage. Never in her reign had she been wounded like this. Never had anyone dared to take her down. Her pride screamed louder than her pain, but her body refused to rise. The human stood before her, sword pointed steadily at her throat. His face was calm, steady, unshaken. He was not smiling. He did not gloat. He was simply resolute, like a man delivering justice, not revenge. The crowd leaned forward, every eye locked on the human, every ear straining to hear his next words. His voice rang out, clear and strong. Your reign ends here. Kneel. The queen's eyes widened. The words struck her deeper than any blade. For centuries, others had bowed to her command. Now, she was the one being commanded to kneel. Her pride burned, her heart resisted. But her people were watching, and for the first time, she saw it. They no longer feared her. The slaves at the edges of the arena raised their heads. They did not tremble anymore. They did not bow. They stood straighter, their eyes fixed on the human, with hope shining like fire. The nobles whispered nervously among themselves. What if the queen truly falls? What becomes of us? The generals tightened their fists but did not move. Even they hesitated, because if she could bleed, if she could kneel, then she was no longer untouchable. The queen snarled, I will never bow to you. Her voice cracked with fury. Blood dripped from her mouth. Her claws dug deep into the stone floor. But the human did not flinch. He stepped closer, his sword pressed against her scaled throat. His eyes locked into hers. His words sharp as steel. You will, or this ends now. The arena fell into absolute silence. The only sound was the queen's ragged breath. She wanted to rise. She wanted to kill him. But her tail, her pride, her weapon was gone. Her body was broken. Her people's faith shattered, and then she felt it, that strange sensation she had never known before. Fear. It crept in her bones. It tightened around her heart. The very thing she had used to control others for years now consumed her. Her body trembled, her strength drained away. Her head lowered slowly. Her knees pressed harder into the stone. The Queen of Fear knelt. The crowd gasped. The sound spread like a wave. They could not believe their eyes. Their queen had bowed, not from choice, not from ritual, but from defeat. The slaves cried out with joy, tears streaming down their faces. The nobles trembled in silence. The soldiers looked at one another, confused and broken. Everything they believed in shattered in that single moment. The human lowered his sword but kept his stance strong. His voice carried across the arena. Power built on fear will always fall, because fear dies the moment courage rises. Today, fear is broken. The queen closed her eyes, her chest rising and falling heavily. Her claws still scraped against the ground. Her pride still burned within her. But she could not deny what had happened. She had been forced to kneel before a human, and her empire had witnessed it. The crowd began to chant softly at first. Not the queen's name, but the human's. The sound grew louder, stronger. A chorus of voices that had once been silent now thundered across the arena. Their tyrant's throne had cracked. Their chains of fear had begun to break. The queen lifted her gaze slightly. Her glowing eyes flickered, not with strength, but with humiliation. She whispered in a trembling voice, "This cannot be. I am a queen. I cannot kneel." But the human stood tall and answered with steady calm. "You already have." And those words sealed her defeat. Her power had been stripped away not by armies, not by rebellion, but by one human with a sword and the will to stand. The queen's rule of terror had ended, but the story was not over. Because when fear falls, the question always remains, what comes next? The arena of Zynth had never been so quiet. The echo of the queen's kneeling still hung in the air. The crowd, slaves, soldiers, nobles, stared in disbelief. Their queen, once untouchable, once a living nightmare, had been brought to her knees by a single human. The severed tail lay across the blood-stained stone. It was no longer a symbol of fear, but of weakness. The sight of it shook the empire to its core. The people no longer trembled. For the first time in generations, they looked up, and they saw not a tyrant to fear, but a man who had shown them courage. The human lowered his sword. He did not raise his arms in victory. He did not demand praise. Instead, he stood tall and silent, letting the moment belong to the people. The crowd began to murmur, the whispers of freedom spreading like wildfire. The queen lifted her head. Her glowing eyes were dim now. Her body trembled, her pride shattered. She tried to speak, but her voice was weak, broken. How could this happen? I ruled with fear. No one could touch me. No one could resist me. The human's voice was steady. You ruled with fear, but fear is fragile. It dies the moment someone refuses to bow. You thought your strength was eternal, but strength built only on fear will always collapse. The queen stared at him in silence. For the first time in her life, she had no answer. Her claws scraped weakly at the ground, but she knew, deep inside, that her reign was over. The people of Zynth began to rise from their knees. One by one, slaves stood taller. Soldiers lowered their weapons. Even nobles glanced at each other nervously. The spell of terror had been broken, and once broken, it could not be rebuilt. The human turned from the queen and faced the crowd. His voice carried across the vast arena. I did not come here to rule you. I did not come here to take a throne. I came to show you that courage is stronger than fear. You're not slaves unless you choose to be. You are not weak unless you surrender your will. Stand and claim your freedom. The words struck deep. The crowd erupted, not in fear, not in forced cheers, but in a roar of true voices. Voices of hope, voices of freedom. The sound shook the skies above. For the first time, the people of Zynth cried not for mercy, but but for change. The queen collapsed back against the stone, her eyes wide as she listened. The voices of her people no longer belonged to her. Her empire of fear had fallen in a single day. She was not their ruler anymore. She was only a broken shadow. The generals lowered their heads. They dared not act, because they knew, if they struck now, it would not save her. It would only unite the people further. The nobles whispered in panic. The world they had known was gone. A new one was rising before their eyes. The human looked once more at the queen, her body trembling, her pride shattered. She whispered through gritted teeth, You will never rule them. You are not one of us." The human shook his head. "I do not need to be. I am not here to rule. I am here to remind you all of one truth, that no tyrant is eternal, and no throne built on fear can last forever." He turned his back on her. The ultimate insult. For years, none had dared to turn away from her. Now he walked calmly across the arena floor, sword in hand, his head high. The people watched him go, their voices rising louder, chanting his name, not as a king, not as a conqueror, but as a liberator, as the one who had shown them that they too could stand. The queen bowed her head low. The fire in her eyes dimmed. She realized her greatest nightmare had come true. She had been defeated not by an army, not by another tyrant, but by courage, by a single human who refused to kneel. Above the arena, the skies of Zynth seemed to open, the dark clouds drifting apart, the burning light of the twin suns shining brighter than ever. It felt as though the world itself had been freed. The human stopped at the gates of the arena. He looked back once. His eyes swept over the people, and he spoke his final words. "Remember this day, not because I fought, but because you rose. Your future is yours now. Do not waste it." And with that, he walked into the light, leaving behind a broken queen, a freed people, and the beginning of a new age. The age where fear no longer ruled. The age where courage had won.